And we're very grateful and blessed to have her presence here. So, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and everybody who worked on pulling this together, as well as all of you who came. It's really great. People keep thanking me for bringing in the beautiful weather, which I really didn't do. But it's been just a wonderful energy, which you all did bring. And it was very funny for me. I was watching the coffee. I don't know if I'd call it a crisis, but it was definitely coming out drop by drop by drop by drop, which brought to mind what is one of my very favorite quotations from the teachings of the Buddha. It's really, really simple. And that is, a mind will get filled with qualities like mindfulness or loving kindness moment by moment, the way a bucket will get filled with water drop by drop. A mind will get filled with qualities like mindfulness or loving kindness moment by moment, the way a bucket will get filled with water drop by drop. So I heard this, way back when I first went to India, and I really loved it right away, because right away I can imagine myself standing by that bucket and fantasizing, like, won't it be great when it's completely filled? And I'm fully enlightened, and I'm like back in New York, floating down the streets, wearing my white sari with a beatific smile on my face, but not taking the trouble to add the next drop. Not having enough humility or patience, just to add a moment of mindfulness or loving kindness. And of course, I could easily imagine myself standing by the bucket and doing that other thing we do, which is kind of peering in the bucket and thinking, ooh, it looks really empty. That's never going to get filled. And once again, not doing what we actually need to do, which is the one thing that will get that bucket filled, which is adding the next drop, and then the next drop. And then, since I started using the example, people have come up to me with variations on the theme that I've really liked, like, what if you're standing by that bucket and you completely ignore it, and you kind of peer over into someone else's bucket, like how they doing over there, which we can well imagine. Or a lot of people come up and say, well, what if my bucket has a leak? And I say, these buckets don't leak. That's not going to happen. So there's something I have always found very powerful about that. It's because everything else is like a story we tell ourselves. It'll be great when I get there, I'll never get there, they're going to get there faster than I will, whatever it is. But the reality, the compelling reality is like right now, this moment. If we're relating to it, whatever it is, if we're relating to it with mindfulness and loving kindness, we're doing what we need to do. And that's it. So I'm glad that the coffee, Sharon misbehaved or something, because it brought it to my mind. Okay, why don't we start with a sitting? We can go back to just resting the attention on the feeling of the breath. You can sit comfortably, close your eyes or not, however you feel most at ease. If you like, just start by listening to sound. Letting the sounds come and go without interference. And when you feel ready, move your attention to the feeling of your body sitting. then to the feeling of your breath, just the normal, natural breath. Wherever you feel it most distinctly, the nostrils, the chest, or the abdomen. You can find that place, bring your attention there and just rest. See if you can feel one breath. You don't have to try to block out everything else, the sounds, the images, the sensations. But if you can stay connected to the feeling of your breath, just let them flow on by. Doesn't matter. It's likened to seeing a friend in a crowd. You don't have to shove aside everybody else and say, go away, you're bothering me. But your interest, your enthusiasm is going, there's my friend. It's like, there's the breath. There's the breath. If you like, you can use a quiet mental notation to help support the awareness of the breath, like in, out, or rising, falling, but very quiet. So your attention's really resting in feeling the breath. And if something comes up that's strong enough to pull you away, you get lost in thought, spun out in a fantasy, or you fall asleep, don't worry about it. You can use that moment when you realize you've been gone as a moment of gently letting go and beginning again. Simply return your attention to the feeling of the breath. Shepherd your attention back. That's the drop. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes. Okay, another day of looking at love. Or being in love, or maybe a better way of saying it. We're going to use two theoretical models. I think you're probably familiar with both, and just blend them in this exploration. The first has to do with, let's see, I'll use this as a prop, in the absence of a better prop. Anybody got a book? Thank you. Notebook? Excellent. Okay, so within the Buddhist psychology, when we look at any action that we take, anything we say, anything we do, even actions we restrain from are kind of an action, right? So we look at an action and we can see different component parts. The first is the motivation or the intention behind the action. It's the heart space that is generating the energy to actually perform that action. So maybe I lift up this beautiful book and I hand it to one of you, and all anybody sees is my hand moving down, picking up an object and moving it forward, right? But why am I doing it? What's in my heart that is impelling that action? Maybe I'm offering you the book because I like you and I want you to have it. Or maybe I see you have a green notebook and I think, well, hey, you know, maybe I'll give you this one and you'll give me that green one, which is my favorite color. Or maybe I just gave a big lecture on generosity in front of all these people and I want to appear to be very generous. Or maybe I'm offering it to you because I don't like you and I actually think you hate the color, but you can't but accept it. It's like the same smile, right? Same gesture. Or a million other possibilities about what is generating that movement. So from the classical Buddhist point of view, we say the karmic seed is in the motivation. It's in the intention. There's a power in the action that's not in my hand, right? It's actually in the mind state that is originating the action. So there's a lot of attention paid to, bless you, one's motivation, one's intention behind any action. This is very different from how most of us perhaps grew up, with like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And what do you mean you had a good intention? You were so stupid, or something like that. It's quite a different way of looking at things, looking at the mind, looking at life. And I think it's kind of interesting to contemplate because actually it's in the field of motivation that one is able to distinguish one action from what on the surface looks completely identical, right? There's no way of knowing from my hand or the presentation what was going on inside me. And this is really meant to be an invitation for one to look at one's own motivation, not to sort of imagine that you can suss out everyone else's. But to start paying attention, it's another way of saying it is, what do I really want from this action? If you're about to have a conversation with somebody and you think of this really nasty piece of gossip, true, but nasty, about somebody else, and you just feel that urge to disclose it, we might, take a moment and look at our motivation. Like, what do we hope is going to come from that? a feeling of superiority for a moment, like I know something you don't know. Will any good really come from that? Do I want to see the destruction of this person's reputation? Or maybe I do, but at least we know. If we kind of just do that pivot and we pay attention to where we're coming from. So what's motivating me? What do I want? Maybe in conversation we want to be helpful. Maybe we want to be proven right. The same words could be coming out of our mouth, but we're coming from a very different place. So the field of motivation is a very powerful arena for investigation in this kind of worldview. And it's said that if we cultivate qualities like loving kindness and compassion, what transforms is actually the field of motivation. It may not change what we do in a particular situation, although it may, but it may not. What it really changes is why we do it. Where are we coming from? Are we coming from a place of caring, or are we coming from a place of disdain? Are we coming from a place of inclusion or a place of exclusion? Are we coming from a place of really being compassionate, or are we coming from a place of feeling kind of like, oh, you poor thing, way over there? It's the way we see the world, so that it's not so much self and other and us and them with a great big other out there, but more that sense, which is really a comprehension of how intertwined our lives are, how connected we all are, which forms the basis for a different field of motivation. And so classically they would say if we've largely been motivated by things like fear in our choices, in what we do, in what we say, and we do practice like loving kindness practice, this will transform. So we're largely coming from a place of connection, feeling connection in our choices, in what we do, in what we say. And another, for me, fascinating element of that is that because that is what transmutes, it's really like a transfiguration of our field of motivation. It's very different than like giving ourselves a lecture, and being in a situation where we're thinking, oh, I really don't want to be nice, but I spent the whole damn weekend in a workshop about loving kindness, and what if anyone found out that I completely wasted my time, so I better act like, It's not like that. It's like something has shifted inside of us so that we're more and more coming from a different place, particularly in the aspect of fear or aversion. Fear or anger, making up aversion. We're coming from a different place. Okay, so that's the whole first, we'll come back to that as well. It seems that contemporary research as well as ancient teaching tell us the same thing. This is what transforms, is that field of motivation in the cultivation of love and kindness. So, the second aspect of an action is, we could call it the skillful execution of the action. So I have this really beautiful motive. I want to give one of you this book. And I might think, there's only one book. There are a number of people in this room, and maybe this is the kind of thing best done privately. Maybe I should write you a note. Maybe I should take you aside, and we'll just do it over there instead of in front of everybody, whatever it might be. So this is a question of mindfulness. It's mindfulness in a larger context. It's paying attention to where we are. There are a lot of people in the room. Or last time I did this, it didn't go over that well. Maybe I'll try this other way. Something like that. So it's a kind of bigger, broader sort of mindfulness. And usually I try to distinguish the motivation from the skillful execution of the action, because the skillful execution of the action is also quite contextual, right? And people might say, People often actually do confuse those two, they conflate them. And that's the place where people also get kind of nervous, like, oh, if I were to develop a more loving heart, I could only say yes. I could only invite you to move in. In New York, this would be the glaring example. I don't know what the Tucson equivalent is. I could only give you my rent-controlled apartment. I don't know what it would be here. Something so ludicrous. That's just crazy. And that's the place where people think that if we were to cultivate more loving kindness, our world will get smaller and smaller and smaller because we can only smile. We can only be kind of sweet. We can't say no. We can't draw a line. But really, these are two very different, although obviously related, they're very different aspects of an action. Because in fact, we can be coming from a genuinely loving place and what I sometimes call our best guess of what the most skillful action is in a certain context, in a certain moment, is saying no. It's not giving you the money. It's not letting you move into my apartment. It doesn't mean we're coming from a bad place. It means that's our best sense of discernment, really, of the most skillful action to take in that context. And this is a very important distinction because this is the place, like I said, where people get so nervous. It's going to doom me to be like one of those sickly sweet, kind of phony doormats, which is the word I hear a lot. But it's really not so. This is why, we explore things like fierce compassion or boundaries or things like that. Because we genuinely, truly can be coming from a loving place. And our best determination of an action, appropriate as best as we can tell, to that time and place is pretty intense. It doesn't fit that picture of the kind of smiling, whatever. I sometimes quote my friend, my colleague Sylvia Borstein. The quote started with a great Indian saint named Curly Baba, who said, never throw anyone out of your heart. Never throw anyone out of your heart. And Sylvia had a kind of addendum to that where she said, never throw anyone out of your heart. You might throw them out of your life, but never throw them out of your heart. And it's a little harsh, but, it's actually something to look at. And so those are the first two elements of an action. And then you might want this back. Thank you. And then there's the third element of an action, which is the immediate result. So maybe I think really carefully, I have this beautiful motive, I'm as sensitive as I possibly can be to the context, to skill, in giving it to you. But maybe you did just check your cell phone messages and found out you won $10 million in the lottery. And you're going to buy this place. And you're busy mentally redecorating it. And I hand you the notebook and you're completely indifferent to it. And you just sort of walk away. That is part of the nature of things, right? That we cannot control the thought stream of the person who is receiving this gift, who's on the other end of the action. As I quoted here before, you can't really say to somebody, walk into the room and don't check your cell messages, don't check your email, don't have a conversation with anybody, and don't think a single thing. Because I need you to come into the room as a totally blank slate. Not going to happen. So, that doesn't mean that we don't care and that we don't learn even, from people's reactions. Sometimes it's incredibly good feedback and it's important, but that idea that we can be in control of how somebody will respond, that we can do something so perfectly, so that everyone, everywhere, at all times, will say, that's the best notebook I ever got in my life. I can't tell you how much it means to me. Changed my whole life. Which is, of course, what we want. And sometimes we get it, it's great. And sometimes we don't. But that, what do we usually do in the moment that we don't get that kind of praise? We rarely think, maybe they've got something going on, More commonly, I'm an idiot, I can't believe I gave him a notebook. Why do I always give the wrong gift? I don't know how to give anything. So there's a fine line in there, we don't want to be impervious to what people say, but at the same time, we don't want to be defined by people's reaction either, because it's hopeless. We will never get only praise or get precisely the reaction that we want. And so there's a certain balance that we need to bring to bear, that wisdom tells us to bring to bear, both in terms of the reaction, praise and blame, which we'll go into more later, and also the sense of immediacy, because sometimes you give somebody something and they don't sort of respond like, oh, you just turned my whole life around, which makes us sad. And then sometimes a long time later, they come back. And they say, wow, you gave me that book and it didn't really mean much to me at the time, as though we couldn't tell. And, but, now the circumstance of my life has really shifted. My mother got sick, or I lost my job, or this incredible opportunity opened up in front of me, and I'm kind of nervous about going for it, but I picked up the book. And it was perfect. There's so many things we do or say that are really just like planting a seed that we can't reasonably expect are going to bear fruit right away. Oh, we like that, but if we expect it, we're in trouble. So to have kind of a sense of perspective, something more spacious, something more open, is really a beautiful way to respond to the reality that the immediate result right in front of us of the action may not be the end of the story. And we don't need to hold on to it as though it were definitely the end of the story. So we have the three parts of action, the motivation, the skillfulness of the execution, and the immediate result. The motivation is something we use mindfulness to keep looking at, to pay attention to see where we're coming from. And of course, you see many things. You see mixed motives, you see a lot of complexity, but we can often get a thread, of what we most want out of a situation, and let that knowledge guide us in some way. And the cultivation, the conscious cultivation of certain qualities like loving kindness will transform that field of motivation. We can get better discernment through a kind of broader mindfulness, really paying attention to context, really listening, learning from our mistakes, even learning skills, particular skills really help in the execution of an action, even though it's very formulaic in so many ways. Things like communication skills actually do make a difference. I often talk these days, but I think I went to Seattle one year and the Dalai Lama was speaking, and I was kind of rolling on the floor. He was I found him very funny because he was saying something like, perhaps it's not so skillful to say it's warm in the room because maybe not everyone is feeling warm. Perhaps it's more skillful to say, I am feeling warm. And I just found that so amusing. I thought, oh, he sounds like every communications coach from California I've ever heard. Use I language. And I thought, who's he been talking to? Oh, he's probably been talking to communications coaches from California. But isn't it true? It's like you go to the movies with a friend, and you walk out, and the friend says, that was the best movie ever made. And there's now no room in the entire universe for you to say, I didn't like it that much. Because they have now taken over every inch of space in the world and defined absolute truth. Whereas if you walk out of the movies together and they say, I love that movie, there is still room in the universe for you to say, I didn't like it that much. And you can actually have a conversation. So even though it can feel kind of formulaic and something you really have to remember, it is actually a kind of skillful thing to learn. How to express ourselves. Again, you won't have a perfect reaction all the time because life is life. But we can learn skills of action, of speech, and so on that are really useful. So that whole realm is something that is malleable and capable of growing and changing and learning. And then the third, the immediate response, what changes is our ability to be balanced, to bring wisdom to bear. It's not like we're ever going to be in absolute control of someone's reaction or the timing of their receiving our gift in a heartfelt way. It's just not like that. Because the nature of the universe is pleasure and pain and gain and loss and praise and blame and fame and disrepute. Because everybody walks into that room with something going on. Right? Because every moment is conditions coming together and coming apart. So many conditions. And so this is a place where we work to respond more and more with equanimity, with balance, with wisdom. So that's kind of the larger model for the practice that we do, which is the development of the 4 Brahma Viharas, which I described a little bit yesterday. And so just to recap, these 4 qualities that are often talked about together as a kind of bundle. They each have their own flavor, their own challenges in a way, although they're very close in many ways, and they certainly support one another. The word Brahma means celestial or supreme, and I usually say the translation I've heard of it that I like the most is the word best. Vihara means dwelling or abiding or home. So taken together, these 4 qualities form our best home. And throughout the day, we're going to go through these qualities in much greater detail. The first is loving kindness itself, friendship, the deep knowing of how connected our lives are. The second is compassion, the trembling or the quivering of the heart in response to seeing pain or suffering. It's an actual movement of our hearts that recognizes pain as pain. The third is sympathetic joy, actually being happy for other people's happiness rather than feeling sort of ripped off and that something's been taken away from me because you got that. And the fourth is equanimity itself, which is, in this context, equanimity means the balance that's born of wisdom. It's knowing that we're not in control. As an example, that doesn't mean we don't try to make a difference. It actually helps us try to make a difference because we can do that in a more sustained way, not so upset, not so impatient, not so frustrated. When we don't get what we want, we don't get the response we want right away. We can have some wisdom infusing all of our actions that allows us to work in a different way, to be in a different way. So each of these, I was saying to somebody the other day, maybe it was here, that words are kind of failing me these days. I think it was here. Each of these words is complex. Love or loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy is odd. We never say that, but and equanimity. These are very challenging concepts. Equanimity reminds us of indifference and not caring and apathy. And, a friend told me, I don't know if it's still true, but at the time we were teaching together, and he said if you Google compassion, one of those things that comes up very quickly is compassion fatigue. So we have this association of compassion with exhaustion. So each of these is very rich and complex and intricate field of exploration and practice, and that's what we'll do throughout this day. So, I would suggest we do some walking meditation again. We take about half an hour. I'm going to ask you again to be silent in this period so that it really is a time of practice. For those of you who were not here yesterday, if you want to do loving kindness while walking, the instruction was to, first of all, just walk at a normal pace, get outside, eyes open, and silently repeat certain phrases. Directing loving kindness toward yourself. So the phrases could be something like, may I be happy, may I be peaceful. May I be happy, may I be peaceful. Very simple. And just have a light awareness resting on the repetition of those phrases, because you want to be aware of everything, going on around you, not barge into anyone or anything, and appreciate everything going on around you, but you just have this other thing going. And then, if someone comes strongly into your consciousness, someone walks by and you see them, you hear a dog, you hear a bird, someone comes powerfully into your mind from home, just for a few moments, include them like, oh, be happy. And then go back to the repetition of the phrases for yourself. The key to this practice, like every single practice, is going to be beginning again. You'll get distracted, your mind will go all over the place, don't worry about it. That's totally expected, but you realize that at some point, just start over. Come back and do the phrases for yourself. Okay, so let's do that, and I'll see you in about half an hour.